A Minnesota lawmaker focused on protecting kids after far too many adults failed him. The deeply personal story he's telling decades later on the House floor. Representative Jim Nash is in his fifth term, a Republican representing the Waconia area. Sir, good to see you. Thank you for joining me to talk about this.
Thanks for having me back on, Liz. I appreciate it.
It's not often this session. We've seen bipartisan support for much. Your bill, though, has that. Tell us first what House File 4793 would mean in Minnesota.
What the bill does is it makes it so that a mandatory reporter or the supervisor of a mandatory reporter can't divert the report. So for many of your viewers, they might remember a Star Tribune four-part series that talked about how a supervisor of a mandatory reporter basically made a report go away and was changed in the severity of how they investigated it. And the bill would not allow that to happen. And if it did happen, it would make it a misdemeanor crime.
You've been very open in your floor speeches with your reasons for being the author of this bill. But Representative Nash, you were the victim of horrific child abuse growing up.
I was. For the better part of 17 years of my life, my dad beat me on a regular occasion for inexplicable reasons. There were things as severe as being beaten with a baseball bat, having my ribs broken, axe handle. I had a broom handle broken across my face. One time, my parents separated and I was helping my father move into his apartment. And he got angry at me and he pushed me through a wall in his apartment and kicked me out of his apartment. And that was directly adjacent to the red light district in Denver, Colorado. And I was left to my own for hours. I was making collect phone calls back in the day when one made collect phone calls. And I finally got my pastor to come and get me. And then by the time we made it back to our home in the foothills of Colorado, my dad had already returned home. So he just didn't bother looking for me, abandoned me in a very dangerous neighborhood. And this continued for a lot of years. And each time I would get injured enough to warrant going to the hospital, they would always explain it away as Jim fell. And my mom was a mandatory reporter and was the director of nursing at the hospital that I was taken to. And she would find a way to creatively sweep the whole thing under the rug.
In your case, as you've said, it's a number of mandatory reporters that failed you. A favorite teacher you've talked about, as you said, your own mother. If it's okay, we're going to listen into just a bit of your testimony during a recent committee hearing.
And I thought to myself, well, the next question that I want to ask, I can never unask if I ask it. So I asked her, I said, Mom, why didn't you save me? And she didn't say anything for a while. We were in a car driving, and I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting to hear what her answer was. And she says, well, I guess I just figured you could take it. It's about the worst answer you could ever get from your mom, who is tasked with saving you from whatever. I mean, I've talked to my wife about this a number of times, and I think of my own responsibility as a dad. I would literally put myself between my kids and harm. And my mom did nothing and made it go away. To be frank, I don't ever want to see my dad alive again. Have no need to talk to him. That's a big statement. That's a lot to say. But the abuse that I got as a result of being in that house was bad, but it was compounded by the fact that I found out later all that I found out. To have your mom tell you that she just figured you could take it, I don't understand that. Don't know that I ever will. But I am so grateful to the people who tried. So that teacher, I keep in touch with her today. And I couldn't be more grateful for her trying to save me.
How difficult was that for you to talk about and to open up?
Well, as your viewers just saw in the clip, I got pretty emotional. And for anyone who follows me at the Capitol, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers have seen, that is not what a Jim Nash floor speech looks like. I am the guy who usually is on the pointy end of the stick on some issue, but I had to be very transparent and honest and talk about some of the things that happened to me. You know, the favorite teacher that you just mentioned, she tried very hard to save me, and the principal shut that down and made it go away. So, you know, people who were in positions of authority, one, my mother, and two, the principal of the school, they covered it up. And I can't sit by idly anymore. You know, I'm 55 years old, and there are times that I don't sleep at night. I wake up with nightmares. And I figured that if I'm going to get better, I have to deal with this. So this was an opportunity that I chose not to pass up, and I forced myself to talk about it. And it's been transformational on many levels. I've had people reach out to me. I got a phone call from a person who I don't know, and he didn't give me his name, but he said, you know, I live in St. Cloud. I'm 75 years old, and your childhood was my childhood. And he said, thanks for standing up for us. And I've gotten lots of comments like that in texts and emails, and a couple of very nice handwritten notes. So I know that I'm onto something, and I'm sad that I actually have to be onto something in a state like Minnesota.
And explain that a bit more, where the law stands currently, who these mandatory reporters are, and then no consequences at the moment for anyone to prevent or discourage one of these people from reporting child abuse?
Yeah, a mandatory reporter, Liz, is somebody in a position of authority, typically like a teacher or a coach or a nurse or a principal or a pastor, a counselor, people like that. And the requirement of them doing that job is if they see abuse, that they have to move it up the chain and make a report, hence mandatory reporter, to say this person is being abused. It doesn't have to be a kid, it could be an adult. And the failings to date are not really that much. It's a slap on the wrist. And when you look at what the net result has been for me and for the dozens of people who have reached out to me, it creates a lifelong sense of confusion. It creates lifelong pain, and we have to make it so that we discourage people from doing it. We can't stop all of it, but the goal should be to make it more difficult to sweep these things under the rug. And you know, I've committed for however long I'm here at the House of Representatives to use my position and to use my voice to continue doing more things. And I would imagine that there will be other pieces of legislation that result as coming out of what I've tried. I got to tell you, it's hard. It's really hard, and it takes you to a place that you don't really want to visit very often, because it is the reason that I don't sleep. I sleep about 2 hours a day, and I have to figure out how to deal with that. And I know that statistically, the number of people that will watch this, because you have a great audience, there are people who are in the same boat that I'm in. And I'm one of 201 people that get to make laws in the state of Minnesota. And I'm not going to mess it up.
Well, speaking of using that voice, this is an incredible moment, a powerful moment I want to play. This is some more testimony. This is from the House floor.
So what I've learned since I last addressed you and since I talked in committee is I have two biological sisters, Karen and Jennifer. I have two stepsisters, Summer and Valerie. All of us were beaten. All of us were beaten badly. I took the worst, I think, because my dad just figured his son could take the abuse better than the daughters. All of us had somebody who made a report, and all of those people made it go away. Because no kid should ever wind up as a 55-year-old guy who doesn't sleep much, who is confused about his childhood, is confused when his mom told him that she knew about the mandatory or the abuse and just figured that he could take it. If you remember, I told you that my mom shared that with me when We were in a car a couple of years ago. I asked her about all her work as a mandatory reporter. She says, yes, Jimmy, I was so proud. I saved so many women and so many children. I'm so proud of that. And I asked her, I said, well, Mom, why didn't you save me? This makes it so that the Jims and the Karens and the Jennifers and the Summers and the Valeries have a little hope, and that somebody who knows better will be held accountable for not.
So there you are, Representative Nash. You're speaking about your siblings, your step siblings, and how they've been affected in all of this. What is the status of this bill? Will it pass this session?
This is where a bipartisan thing actually is possible. So the public safety chair, Kelly Moeller, and I say this jokingly on the floor, she and I agree probably on like 11 things, some of which is the weather, the color of the sky. But we came together on this because there's a lot of people up here who are impacted by this, and she's been really solid to work with. You know, the folks who I serve with have all come around me, and they've made it so that this is also important to them because they recognize that either in their family or in their district that there are people whose lives have been shattered by this. And you know, I was able to break the cycle, and I'm not an abuser, and a lot of that comes from my faith in Christ. But I was able to break the cycle, and we need to encourage others to do so and find ways to do so. And if the law can be changed to discourage people from avoiding their responsibility, that's great. But I want to be an example to people that you don't have to be what others would put you on the track of being, that you have the ability to not do this. And I think that's been one of the big takeaways too, is other people have been shocked that I haven't repeated the cycle. And that's the next step, I'd say, is how do we help other people lift their way out of this, but not repeat the cycle?
Well, of course, we're wishing you the very best, and we will stay tuned and continue to follow this. But Representative Jim Nash, thank you for joining me. More importantly, thank you for the work you're doing to prevent this from happening to more kids in Minnesota.
I'm very grateful for this opportunity, Liz. I'm really appreciative of making the time and sharing this with your viewers.
That'll do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We'll see you next time.